This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Well, amid the suspension of politics in the wake of the massacre in Las Vegas, the world continues to spin on its axis, and we've got to tackle a lot of issues that are ongoing, including what's happening in the swamp. And what's happening in the swamp is the push for tax reform after the president rolled out the framework of tax reform that he believes should be advanced by congressional Republicans. Jeffrey Sachs, who is a Columbia University Keynesian, had this to say about the Trump plan, so you get a little sense of where the big government left is coming from. And frankly, some on the big government right, quote unquote.
I call it unbelievable that it took them 8 months to write what should have taken about 3 hours. There's not a number here. There's not a table here. This has nothing to do with the fiscal reform. This has nothing to do with the fiscal conservatism. This is rich people that pay for the Republican Party wanting taxes cut. This is Donald Trump trying to end the estate tax so he can pass along his wealth to his children. This is shambolic. It's unbelievable.
Shambolic. He created a word.
I was going to say, you're a wordsmith.
Well, here's the thing. Jeffrey Sachs is one of these kind of respected Ivy League leftist economists. Was that an economic analysis? Or was it him reading into the heart and mind of Donald Trump and Republican donors? I mean, who's shambolic here? The economist playing political pundit, or the politicians advancing a political idea under the rubric of tax reform? Well, why don't we get a professional answer to that question? And to do that, I can't think of anybody better than Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good to be with you.
So what about Jeffrey Sachs? Is it shambolic, Grover?
Well, you kind of put your finger on it earlier. I went to school with Jeffrey Sachs. I've talked to him on this stuff. He's a left-wing Democrat who plays an economist on TV, and all he has to do is say something sufficiently left-wing, and the left goes, oh, how sophisticated that is. So he does the same thing on global warming. He actually got up and went on and on about, it's just everything's just an attack on the Republicans for him. And when you point out that actually Harry Reid was stopping votes on allowing nuclear power to move forward, which if you believe that you want less carbon in the atmosphere, nuclear power would be the way to go. He didn't care. He just wanted to attack Republicans. So, look, but this is what we always do. His comment that it's not much of a plan just really shows how uninformed he is. The Republicans have been working on this for about 3 years. They have a whole series of everything that's in that has been scored. Are the exact numbers laid out? Well, gee whiz, let's see. 6 guys representing the House, the Senate, and the White House took all the ideas from the House and Senate and said, here's where the consensus is, and they laid it out. It has to go through the House of Representatives. They will write the bill. These 6 guys can't say this is exactly what's going to happen. And it has to go through the Senate, and the president will sign it. But the good news for people who actually care about economics and jobs, a word that Jeffrey Sachs didn't mention in his whole thing, this is a jobs bill. This is a piece of legislation that is designed to create jobs. It takes the business tax from 35% down to 20%. Trump had wanted to go to 15. I like 15 better than 20. It's lower. But we tax our businesses at 35%. The Chinese at 25%. The Chinese at 25%. The Russians at 20%. The Canadians at the national level at 15%. We compete with other countries that don't hobble and damage their own citizens and their own businesses. Taking that down will be tremendously helpful to economic growth. And we do it not just for larger businesses, corporations, internationally. We also do it in this bill, something that the left is really working hard not to have to focus on.
Grover, what about
We
the
tax.
yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, what about
we
the
tax our small businesses
right.
higher than the big businesses, 40% instead of 35. That's going to be fixed by this as well.
And what about individual taxpayers? I mean, I'd like to keep more of the money I make than give it to the government.
Yes. Well, two things. If people like Jeffrey Sachs, who make a lot of money doing this, want to give more money to the government, they can just write a check. They don't have to bother their neighbor or put their hands in their neighbor's pockets. But every single American who pays income taxes, federal income taxes, will see their marginal tax rates reduced. There'll be 4 rates. 0. The first rate is 0 for a married couple up to $24,000. 0 income tax rate on $24,000. Then there's a 12% rate, later a 25% rate, and higher incomes a 35% rate. Right now there's 7 rates, as high as about 40%. But every American gets a rate reduction, and every American sees their standard deduction for an individual jump from $6,000 to $12,000, and from $12,000 to $24,000. So this is a significant tax cut for middle-income people. 95% of Americans will no longer have to itemize, because if you were to take all your receipts, they wouldn't add up to $24,000 for most married couples. Only 5% of Americans will have to go through the work of doing all this, of itemizing things. So it's significant simplification. We also have in there full business expensing. So if a company spends $1 million on new equipment so its employees can be more productive and get paid more, you expense that. You don't pay taxes on that million because you spent it. Right now, you depreciate it over 5, 10, 20 years. And what happens there is it just makes it more expensive to invest in new businesses. So between those things, I think we're going to see strong economic growth. Remember, Reagan gave us growth for 7 years, averaging 4% a year. Obama gave us growth for 7 years, averaging 2% a year, both of them coming out of recession. Now, Reagan had to fight inflation and the falling economy, and Obama, 6 months into his administration, came in at the bottom of the recession. 6 months later, we started to grow slowly, but it was the worst recovery in recent American history, 2% a year. More people left as a percentage of the economy, more people left the job force. People, usually during a recovery, people who'd been out of work, people who'd gone to school instead of working, people who'd retired early, come back into the labor force and say, oh, there are jobs. I want a job. I didn't think there were any, so I quit looking. Now I'm back in. And that number goes up. All during the Obama administration, that number got worse.
Well,
leaving the workforce.
So let me present Tyler Cohen's argument, which you may already know, and get your response. Tyler Cohen was a libertarian-oriented economist at George Mason University. He suggests that it's not proper to call what's been proposed a tax cut, it's tax shift, because 10 years or so, as the U.S. population ages, the fiscal burden of Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security are going to be greater. So today's tax cuts are going to have to be paid for with tomorrow's tax increases on capital gains and higher marginal rates, and maybe even a border adjustment tax that Paul Ryan had proposed. And so all you're doing is deferring tax increases down the road.
I understand what he's trying to do, which is focus on spending.
Right.
He's quite correct. But we need to be able to chew gum and walk at the same time. We need to take tax rates down to get economic growth and to leave money in people's pockets. And we need to reform entitlements. I think if you look at this House and Senate and President, they've been more than willing to reform both Medicare and Obamacare. We came one vote short of block granting all of Obamacare, and that was McCain voting on peak rather than something else. So the modern Republican Party in Congress has only got 2 additional votes. You lose 3 votes in the Senate, you can't do anything. But even with what they had, they came within 1 vote of fundamentally reforming 2 entitlements. And if we do our job right and get a good tax cut that is outlined and clear, I don't know why it's not clear to Jeffrey Sachs, pretty clear to me exactly what they're going to do. And in point of fact, if you talk to any smart Democrat, they know exactly what the Republicans are going to do, and they're terrified at the economic growth that will come because it makes the 8 years of Obama's bad economy a lie when they say that it couldn't be helped. Yes, it could have been helped. He gave us the lousy recovery because of taxes and spendings and massive regulation. You go the Reagan route of less regulation, less spending, and lower tax rates, you get stronger growth. Remember at the end of the we've had too many presidents here. The end of the Carter years, they said there were limits to growth, and all the smart people like Jeffrey Sachs in the Club of Rome said, you can't grow anymore. Now we're just going to have to divide up what exists between people, and that'll be the government's job, deciding who gets what, because there are limits to growth. And now you're hearing people say 2% growth, instead of being a lousy record, that's the new normal.
Well,
that's nonsense, and we're going to fix that.
Put your political pundit hat on for a minute, because if you have big government Republicans like McCain and Collins, maybe Murkowski, if you have them stop the tax cuts in the Senate, what are the political implications for the Republican Party? There's a good piece in The Atlantic by McKay Coppins, essentially arguing that the populist revolt that buoyed Trump to the White House is not under Trump's control. And Trump could be discarded by it just like any other politician at some point. Certainly Republican majorities could be discarded probably first and foremost. So what do you see as the implications for failure on this score after the failure on Obamacare replace?
Look, I think it would be extremely bad for the modern Republican Party to not get this tax cut through. The good news is that the Senator from Alaska, Murkowski, will be supporting it. I believe Susan Collins will be cheerfully supporting the tax cut as well. And McCain's people say he wants to be helpful on this. We should have the votes. This is one of the reasons we're going through regular order and having hearings and big debates. I want a 2.5-3 month debate where we talk about cutting taxes, and the Democrats. There's 30 million small businesses that made a significant tax cut, 30 million. And the people who run those have spouses and children and neighbors and employees. I want to spend 2.5-3 months with the Democrats spitting on those self-employed small businesses struggling and calling them names and saying they don't care, and pointing out that the Republicans, for the first time in recent history, since 1931, are willing to take the tax rates, the abusive tax rates on self-employed small businessmen and women, down to lower levels rather than up as high as they are. And when the Democrats, quote unquote, tax the rich, what they're really doing is about 3/4 of that is hitting smaller businesses that pay their taxes as if they were individuals. Mm-hmm. And you look at it and say, oh, that's a rich person. Actually, it's a small company with 4 employees. It looks like a rich person on the tax return.
That they otherwise pay a lot of lip service to, wanting to see grow, right? So the hypocrisy on that score as well.
Well, they do. But when you put something in front that every self-employed small businessman, woman in this country sort of understands now, but after a national debate will fully understand exactly what the history of this has been, what it's doing, and the Democrats want to tax them and regulate them, and the Republicans want to celebrate them as the people. Half of American jobs are in those pass-through companies where people pay their taxes as individuals. Half of American jobs. And we beat that sector senseless, or rather the Democrats do, and they say they're rich people and they hate them. And half are major corporations, half of employment. Half of business income is in companies that are larger. Half of business income is in smaller pass-through companies. And this is a very long ignored part of the economy. I think it's politically powerful when you have 30 million people, plus their families, who understand that one party hates their guts and has contempt for them, and one recognizes what they do and how important it is to the country, and wants to make sure that they're not beaten senseless with taxes.
All right.
So this is a good debate to have. The Democrats will rue the day that they got into it. But what really cost them is when we get growth, we win in the 2018 elections. And then the comment that Tyler made, then we can begin to have the kind of reforms for welfare programs, all welfare programs, that we had when Bill Clinton block granted to the state aid to families with dependent children, welfare.
All right. He is Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
We'll win. Take care.
All right.
Okay. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.